This Week in Startups is brought to you by Vanta. Compliance and security shouldn't be a deal breaker for startups to win new business. Vanta makes it easy for companies to get a SOC 2 report fast. Twist listeners can get $1,000 off for a limited time at vanta.com/twist. LinkedIn Marketing. To redeem a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit and launch your first campaign, go to linkedin.com/thisweekinstartups. And Fiverr. Find the perfect freelance services for your business. Go to fiverr.com and use code TWIST to receive 10% off your first order.
Hey everybody, welcome back to This Week in Startups, the podcast where we talk about building startup companies. And here in Silicon Valley, there are two individuals who are considered, really three, who are considered the greatest operators of all time. One would be Sheryl Sandberg from Google fame and also Facebook. You got Keith Rabois, gets a lot of credit for Square and some other companies that he's co-founded and operated within. And of course, there's David Sachs, who was the COO of PayPal, created Yammer, which was the quickest SaaS billion-dollar unicorn sale ever, going from 0 to over 50 million in revenues in about 4 years. I think I have that number correct. You know him. He's one of my best friends in the world. And he is now making his 7th appearance on This Week in Startups. You can see his first one. He was actually episode 5 back in May of 2009. Thank you for doing it back in the day when nobody knew what podcasting was. And you can find a large range of these. But David, like myself, is focused on investing in companies. And he co-founded and is the general partner of Craft Ventures, which has, I believe, 3 funds and over 800 million under management. He'll correct me in a moment. And it's become, I would say, easily top 7 venture capital firm in terms of venture capital founders asking me for introductions. And then when it comes to SaaS, specifically software as a service, really David is one of 2 that I get asked, along with Jason Lemkin, who does a great job and runs the SaaStr conference. David, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, good to be here.
I see you're getting some light reading, and for those of you watching the video, I know there's so many nuggets in that book behind you that you need multiple copies to write all the notes and the side notes, but thank you for that. For those of you listening, he's got a stack of 50 copies of Angel behind him, which is hilarious. Well done. So just correct me if I got anything wrong there. Craft is, you're on the third fund.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
There we go. There we go. Craft.
Let me promote myself for a second.
Yeah, exactly. It's Craft logo.
Yeah. So Craft, we're on Fund 2. It's a $500 million fund. We do classic early stage venture, seed, Series A, Series B, and
3 funds.
We're on our second. The first one was 350, so it's 850 million total.
Great.
And like you said, we do consumer SaaS and marketplaces primarily, and I tend to focus on bottom-up SaaS.
But what does bottom-up SaaS mean?
It's SaaS. It's business software where the users or the employees of the company pull the software into the company like a consumer would. So it's kind of consumerized business software, and that was the go-to-market strategy, or the idea that Yammer really pioneered about a dozen years ago. We were a bunch of consumer internet guys, me after PayPal, I had done consumer, who decided to attack, business software. And we didn't really know anything about it. But in those days, business software was distributed via a sales team, and it was done through the IT department. And our idea was that we can make it viral and kind of go over the heads of the IT department. This eventually became known as shadow IT. And we sort of pioneered this concept of, consumerized business software.
Yeah, I mean, in the old days, Oracle was famous for having the greatest sales training program in Silicon Valley, where they would try to sell some chief technology officer, chief information officer on some $10 million a year license. And then everybody in the company found out one day, okay, we're using Oracle, or okay, one day we're using IBM, or whatever it was. And then because the software was subscription-based and you didn't have to install anything on a server, people could log into a website and just start using it. So there were a couple
Right.
different pieces there that allowed it, right?
Yeah, the prerequisite was software moving to the cloud. Back in the early 2000s, it was still all, on premise. It had to be physically installed on a server behind the firewall. And once that requirement got lifted, because, software moved to the cloud, you could then have users or employees in the company just start adopting it like they would any other product. But that was a big change.
So we're sitting here today in 2020, and it's very easy to start a company in the SaaS space. However, what is really hard is to scale it. And you and I see this
Right.
all the time, me as an early seed stage investor and you as a seed, Series A, Series B investor, just slightly down the road. We overlap a bit there. But you wrote a phenomenal piece, which it resonated so deeply with me, and I don't do this often, but when I see a piece that's written by an expert that gives actual practical advice, that's not some rehash bullshit that I see all the time on Medium, I immediately say, hey, can you come on the podcast and can we just chop it up into pieces and walk people through it step by step? And the title of the piece is, you think you need a COO, a chief operating officer, which you were one of the elite ones here in Silicon Valley. But what you say here in the headline is what you really need is an operating philosophy. So I want to get right into this with you. So I'm sure you have had this experience. I've had this experience. You're at the board meeting. The startup starts feeling like it's coming apart at the seams, and it's basically chaos, right? I think you used the word shit show in your piece in the first sentence. So somebody raises their hand and says, we need a COO. You're saying you don't need a CEO. What you need is an operating philosophy. So explain what the operating philosophy we're talking about here is that you explain. And if you type in, you think you need a COO, what you really need is an operating philosophy into Google, you'll find this, or it's in the show notes.
Right. So the title of the piece is the Cadence, and it's about how you put your startup on an operating cadence to reduce the sense of chaos and synchronize all of the efforts of the employees so that it's not, a shit show. And this is specifically meant for startups that are scaling from, say, 50 employees to 500 employees. That's the time period when this really matters. In the early days of a startup, the biggest problem is not, sort of how to rein in the chaos. It's just how to find product market fit. That's a separate blog post I wrote. You can check it out, called The Wilderness Period. But this blog post, The Cadence, is about how you, once you do find product market fit, how do you scale the company in an elegant way so that you can solidify the initial traction that you have and to scale this thing without it degenerating into just chaos.
And when you're under 30 people, in my experience, everybody's in the same room. Everybody's in the same, earshot of each other. So you haven't broken up into tribes. You haven't broken up into functions as explicitly. And even if you had, you can kind of sit in on each other's meetings. Once you get past 50 and you got 20 people, there's no conference room. And if you did have a conference room big enough, it's chaos. Correct?
Right. So this is what happens is that in the early days, in the beginning of a startup, everybody is in the same room, either physically or virtually, in the days of COVID. As a result, everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Everybody's pretty much a generalist. And the founders run around telling everybody what to do and what to build. And that's the way the startup works in that seed stage all the way to, say, Series A. But around 50 employees, that approach stops scaling because there's just too many people in the company for the founders to just sort of tell them what to do on a task level. And so you start setting objectives. You have to start managing teams and people, and you start divvying up the organization. You start breaking up the org chart into silos and functional areas. You'll create a team for sales and customer support and obviously, R&D, engineering, marketing. And then you'll also hire your first product managers. And so you'll go from the product roadmap being dictated ad hoc by the sort of the founder CEO to, the founders have to work through product managers to guide the development of the startup. And so this is sort of the fundamental change as you get above 50 employees on your way to say 500. And, what typically happens is that because of this these new functional silos in the company, it starts to feel very compartmentalized, and so people kind of feel isolated or disconnected. And at the same time, you've got other functions which are underdeveloped. They may not have mature leadership yet. They may not have any leadership yet. And so you've got other functions that, just aren't quite working. And the result of this sort of disorganization and disconnect is chaos. And so the Cadence is designed to describe my operating philosophy that I started using at PayPal as COO, kind of figured it out there, and then I adapted it for SaaS at Yammer. And it's a sort of an operating philosophy I think everybody can use, and it basically tells you how to organize the 4 major functions of a SaaS startup and then how to synchronize them.
Okay, so when we get back from this quick break, we are going to go over those 4 groups in the company and then how to establish this cadence. And I'm going to crack open a cold Coors right now because it's Friday. And there's nothing I love more than responsibly having a crisp Coors Light on the pod. When we get back, more with Sachs. All right, everybody, if you don't have your SOC 2 compliance buttoned up, well, you're not going to be able to close those giant enterprise customers. It's really that simple. And if you already have a SOC 2 report, don't you want to make it easier to maintain it year after year after year? Of course you do. Well, Vanta's compliance software makes it easier to get and to renew your SOC 2. Their software continuously tests against technical and non-technical SOC 2 requirements. And they partner with over 24 audit firms who have been trained to file SOC 2 reports directly within Vanta. The average 20 to 50 person company is SOC 2 ready with Vanta in just 2 to 4 weeks. Compare that with 3 to 5 months without Vanta. With Vanta, you can connect your tools and infrastructure and continuously monitor for risks and vulnerabilities, and you're going to be able to fix issues fast with actionable guidance. Avoid anxious on-site visits from auditors and never again have to prove compliance with manually captured screenshots. Oh my God, you're never going to have to do that if you just use Vanta. Companies like Notion, which we love, Lattice User Testing, and hundreds of others have successfully gotten their SOC 2 reports with Vanta in weeks, not months. And we are on startup time here. Months? No. Weeks? Yes. Launch portfolio company Lead IQ said they couldn't imagine having to go through SOC 2 compliance without Vanta. And they are one of our fastest growing companies. They're doing incredible. So don't hurt your revenue and frustrate your sales team because you aren't SOC 2 compliant. Get it done, people. Here is your call to action. Unlock those sales and give your employees time back to their calendars to work on more important issues. This is an incredible offer. They're giving our Twist listeners here exclusively $1,000 on a discount to their subscription. Just go to vanta.com/twist. That's Vanta, VANTA.com/twist, TWIST, for $1,000 off. What a great deal. Thanks to Vanta for supporting independent media like This Week in Startups. All right, David Sachs is on the podcast, and we're talking about his recent Medium post. Do you think you need a COO? What you really need is an operating philosophy, and we're going to chop it all up. I was just thinking, what precipitated you? You said you implemented this at PayPal. Was there a moment that precipitated this where PayPal really became chaotic and it felt like it was coming off the rails, and you said, you know what, we need something? Or was it just an eventual, evolution?
Well, PayPal definitely felt that way. I mean, it definitely felt chaotic. And eventually I got promoted to COO to rein in that chaos. And so we, over the course of that was kind of my first startup experience. We learned how to manage a startup that has hundreds of employees and still wants to be very productive and, ship and sell and, all those kinds of things.
So Peter Thiel is trying to keep it together, but there's only one Peter Thiel to go around. You've got nobody who's actually creating this operating philosophy or acting.
Well, Peter, yeah, I mean, Peter, Peter was never very interested in being kind of an operator per se. He was always interested in more of the financial side. He's a great strategist, tremendous strategist, but he was, very happy to kind of hand off a lot of the internal operations. And then when I got to Yammer, I took a lot of the things I learned. Like I said, I adapted it for a SaaS startup. The main difference being that SaaS startups need a sales team. And so we learned how to do enterprise sales. And then, in order to enable the sales team, you need a marketing team knows how to create the right kind of collateral, and so on. And so we sort of adapted this operating philosophy. Again, I call it the Cadence, for a SaaS company. And, at Yammer, I was basically my own COO. We didn't have a COO at Yammer, and it worked it worked fine.
Okay, so we mentioned there were 4 different key components of this. Sales and marketing. Some people consider that the same thing, but you break it into 2 pieces that are kind of sharing the bunk beds there. I would assume.
Yeah. So sales. So I identify 4 functions that I think are critical at a SaaS startup. There are sales and marketing, but there's also product management and finance, and those are really the 4 key functions. Now, sales and marketing are related, but they're actually in my system, they're on very different schedules. So the first, there's a few sort of key insights to the Cadence. Okay. So one is that you have the 4 key functional areas that I've just mentioned. The second is that sales and finance are on the same calendar. Okay. And all 4 of these functions are best run on a quarterly cycle. That's one of the things we should get into, but they all make more sense. They run more harmoniously on a quarterly cycle, but it's not the same quarterly cycle. Sales and finance are on one cycle, and then product and marketing are on another cycle. And you actually want to offset those 2 cycles by about half a quarter. But when you snap them together with that offset, that is what creates a single operating cadence for the whole company. And once you have that, you can then define your events, your all hands meetings. You can create, again, this operating rhythm to the company that, alleviates this feeling of chaos and disorganization.
So most people would say, okay, everybody's on the same quarter and we're going to have a quarterly review. Sales goes up first. Marketing talks about what they did to drive that. Product tells us what's going on, and finance tells us if we're still in business and how many months of runway we get. You're saying put 2 in between what would be the traditional quarters of, January to the end of March, put one of those right on February 15th.
Right. You actually don't want to light everybody's hair on fire at the same time. So finance and sales are going to be on the same calendar, and that is going to be the fiscal calendar. Okay. And so the fiscal calendar, every company as an accounting requirement has a fiscal year, and they'll have fiscal quarters. And so the first question you have to answer is, well, what is my fiscal year end going to be? Most companies default to having a December 31st year end, but for a sales-driven SaaS company, it can often make sense to have the calendar and the fiscal year end on January 31st for the simple reason that you don't want to be closing out the year during that sort of holiday period, that Christmas to New Year's period. It can be pretty rough on your sales team to be trying to close out the number, trying to hit your number for the entire year during that holiday week. And so what I recommend for most sales-driven SaaS companies is they actually have a January 31st fiscal year.
Which can be confusing if you don't know it, but it's just alleviates that brutal thing where the salespeople come to you and they're like, I could have closed this, but it was Christmas, and they're going to sign it, but... And it's just dumb that they're forced to sprint when everybody else leaves on the 19th.
Right. It's inhumane for your sales reps. And also smart customers know to demand discounts during that last week of the year because they know everyone's scrambling to try and make some number that they've promised the board. So I just generally find that it's better to kind of like opt out of that whole thing and just have your fiscal year end on January 31st.
So you got November, December, January is Q4.
Yes, exactly.
February 1st is Q1. I love it.
That's right. So Q1 is February, March, April, and so on down the line. Okay. So that's the first thing you do. Now, the reason why sales is on that same calendar is because you want your fiscal quarters and your sales quarters to be, snapped together. When your board reviews your quarters, it reviews the data that your finance team puts together, you don't want to be reporting out half-baked sales numbers, right?
Yeah, it's
you
brutal.
want to see a complete quarter sales activity to know how the sales team did. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put your sales team on a quarterly plan that coincides with your fiscal quarters. So, on a January 31st year end, you're going to have February, March, April will be your first quarter sales plan. And, what I mean by sales plan is when you think about the quotas for your sales team, they're going to be quarterly quotas that end on, at the end of April and so on down the line.
So if you say, hey, we want to hit $1 million in Q1, we have 10 account executives, everybody's responsible for $100,000 in AR in Q1, and it's a little more in Q2 and a little more in Q3,
Right.
et cetera. When you report your financials, you can actually predict the financial need of the business vis-a-vis fundraising. And hey, we're 105, we're 110% on plan, or we're 90% on plan. And this is where the cash runs out, because that's the other thing is you have everybody starts gaming the board. I don't know if you've been in this board meeting where the sales team is sandbagging or exaggerating with the pipeline. The finance team can't get a handle, so they get conservative, and everybody's kind of finger pointing, right?
Right. So what you want to do is, this is partly why sales and finance need to be synchronized or coordinated, right? Is the quarter begins, I think every fiscal quarter should begin with a sales kickoff, where you bring your whole sales organization together and you hand out their new sales plans. And the sales plan is going to contain their territory, it's going to contain their quotas and their commission rates, and if there's any spiffs or objectives, that it will all get handed out at the beginning of the quarter.
Explain a spiff, by the way.
A spiff is just an objective where the company says, okay, we want to incentivize the sales team to do something. It may be a non-financial goal.
Got it. So if we get if we hit any of these 10 lighthouse customers, high profile customers, everybody on the team gets an extra $1,000.
Right. Or we want to encourage engagement at customers, and that may not immediately translate into higher revenue, but it's still a valuable objective for the company.
Got it.
So it could be something like that. But the important thing generally are the quotas and territories and commissions. And you want to put your sales reps on a quarterly plan, because, it's mostly by process of elimination. Annual plans don't let you adjust things enough in a startup. They're too slow.
Yep.
And then monthly plans are too volatile. The sales results are just too volatile for an individual rep on a monthly basis. And so you generally want to put your sales reps on quarterly quotas. And, for the startup that is doing everything ad hoc, and the founders are just running around telling the sales reps what to do, and they're constantly changing the sales reps' quotas and territories, putting them on a written quarterly plan will instantly make the whole sales team feel better. They'll feel like the goalposts aren't being arbitrarily changed.
Right.
And it'll boost their morale. And so you want to put them on these quarterly plans, and you want these quarters to be synced to your fiscal year.
Quarterly is great because, like you're saying, not too short, not too long.
Right.
Because sometimes sales executives are very interesting creatures in terms of management. Incentives actually matter to them more than anybody, right? They pick that profession because they like the incentive. They like breaking the incentive. So if it's yearly, it's just too long.
The feedback loop is too long. Yeah.
And if everybody crushes it, you're the manager. Let's say everybody crushes the quarter.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on a yearly plan, well, maybe they're going to all ease off in Q2. Whereas you can change the quota for Q2 reasonably because you told them you were going to. Hey, great job. Everybody was at 120%. The reward for being at 120% is you got that extra 20% spiff. Q2, it's going to be a little bit higher. We did great Q1. So now you get to change it without it feeling like it was an unfair change where you pulled the rug out from under them, or as you said, move the goalposts.
Right.
Am I correct?
Yes. And too many startups do that, where they're just constantly changing things on the sales team, and it undermines the morale of the sales team. And that's why moving to this idea of a quarterly plan with defined milestones. So starts with sales kickoff, and then that's the first month of the quarter. And then the second month of the quarter, you'll typically have a lot of pipeline inspections. And then the third month of the quarter is this heads down period where people are really focused on putting their deals over the top and hitting their numbers.
Let's talk about pipeline
and sales reps
inspection.
like that routine.
They like that routine. Kickoff,
yes.
Pipeline inspection, and heads down, let's close. Pipeline inspection, explain.
Yeah. So one of the biggest issues I see in startups, that haven't kind of nailed the sales function is that they never know how much business they're going to close in a quarter, right? It's like, to your point, it's that sales forecast that is never correct. And
never correct. One way or the other.
One way or the other.
Yeah.
And so inspection is really the art, really by a sales leader, to ask the right questions of the team to come up with a reliable forecast or estimate in terms of what they're going to do that quarter.
And there's software to do this now where we track, for example, just for the sales of ads for this podcast, we track everybody's deals won, the proposal's been sent out, a demo has been done, or a phone call has been done, and sometimes people grade leads as hot, warm, cold. What is the best practice for a SaaS company in terms of the different status of a client, and then where do the sales executives get cued and maybe massage that you have to undo that investigation? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So Salesforce, it's the default CRM system.
Yep.
They will let you define, or it will let you define the stages of a deal. And then the sales reps will kind of advance the deal. And then typically those stages will have a percent probability assigned to them. And so you can come up with a weighted pipe. But that's what a sales rep will do. It's really up to the sales leader to conduct the inspection on those deals so that you actually can make sure that those estimates are reliable. And what a good sales leader will do is ask the right questions, like, who exactly are you talking to in this organization? Is this the decision maker, or they merely have influence? Are they simply a champion? Do they have budget? Where is the budget coming from? If IT is a stakeholder in the decision, have they approved us yet? Do we have we passed security review? Have they sent us security questionnaires?
Got it.
Are we talking to the CFO yet? Like, are we talking procurement? I mean, there's all these telltale signs. And so, like, what an inexperienced sales rep will do is, and I experienced this, is they'll come running over to the founder and say, "Oh my God, I've got $1 million deal. We're going to close it."
Right.
And then you find out, well, wait, what they've really got is they had one good conversation with a low-level champion at a giant enterprise. And that low-level champion loves the product and would love to see their Fortune 500 company buying it, but they don't really have the clout to make it happen.
All right. So now we have nailed the sales and the finance part. When we get back from this quick break, let's talk a little bit about product and marketing and why you would bundle those together in the 6-week period between the financial quarters when we get back with David Sachs, COO of, one of the best CEOs, I think, of all time in Silicon Valley when we get back on This Week in Startups. Imagine you're about to launch a marketing campaign and it tested really well. The team is really happy and everything is going according to plan. Except for that one thought in the back of your head. How do I ensure the people I want to target will be in the mindset to receive my message, right? You got to get the right person at the right time. Well, the answer is LinkedIn. You know that. When you market on LinkedIn, your message reaches people who are ready to do business. That means your campaign will work as hard as it can as soon as you launch it. No waiting, no games, no wasted audience, reaching the wrong people. Nope. There are over 62 million decision makers on LinkedIn, and they mean business. That's why over 78% of B2B marketers rate LinkedIn as the most effective social media platform for reaching their objectives. And you can engage people you already know based on who's visited your site or people who you've contacted in the past. Sometimes you gotta hit the same person with a message 3, 4, 5 times, and then boom, you get them online for the demo and you close that sale. So here is your call to action. Do business where business is done, and that's LinkedIn. And get $100, 100, the Hundy, from your boy JCal in advertising credits for your first LinkedIn campaign. That's right. If you've never tried this before, $100, you got nothing to lose. Just get in there and visit LinkedIn.com. That's easy. It's already in your toolbar. /ThisWeekInStartups, plural. LinkedIn.com/ThisWeekInStartups, and you will get that $100 in credit. Terms and conditions do apply because they're giving you $100, okay? So thanks again to LinkedIn Marketing. You've solved so many problems for me and the team here, and I really do appreciate that. In fact, I can tell you the story. We're doing Angel University, and man, we're finding a lot of people, high net worth individuals, who want to come to my Angel.University class thanks to LinkedIn Marketing. So go get that Hundy LinkedIn.com/thisweekinstartups. Thanks again, LinkedIn. You support everything we do, and I really do appreciate that. All right, let's get back to this amazing episode. All right, welcome back to This Week in Startups. We have the honor and privilege of having Mr. David Sachs on the program for the 7th time. This has only happened with 5 guests, by the way, for those of you counting at home. It's very rare that somebody has been on the program. In this case, getting close to being on the program once a year, essentially. But, some folks are busy, like Mr. Sachs. Great. I really feel like I deeply understand the finance and the sales piece.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, marketing, I thought marketing was supposed to be with sales. Now, you've broken it and put it on a different cadence. Why?
Well, sales feeds off marketing.
Okay.
But marketing feeds off product. Okay. So that's why marketing is on the same cadence as product.
It's amazing.
Because
like just saying that, it's so logical, but nobody's written that down. It's so obvious. Product gives marketing something to market, and then marketing gives those leads to sales.
Yeah. So basically, in a startup, most news that a startup generates will somehow be product news, right?
Sure.
So marketing feeds off product. Product, it gives marketing the grist for the mill. If the startup stops shipping, the news starts becoming kind of fake and manufactured, right?
We had a hire, we hired somebody, or we raised money. It's not, we released this new feature that is going to blow you away. You need a demo of this feature.
Startup news should really be product centric, right? Because if you're not shipping great product, what's the point?
Yeah. I mean, it's innovate or die, right? I mean, and this is why our friend Elon is just, or Steve Jobs, or Benioff, they've become incredibly good at this cadence of releasing product after product. Now, some of them are duds, some of them are not important, some of them fall flat, but some of them, like the Cybertruck, people won't shut up about.
Okay, so that's a great point. Those are the examples I give in my blog.
Yes.
And here's the trick that they figured out is that you need to have a launch event to focus the world's attention. So just putting out a press release is not good enough. It doesn't penetrate the clutter. You have to combine a live demo of your new product, and then you add other things. You talk about new customer logos. You talk about your growing market share. You talk about financing news. You can include the new metrics or milestones that you've hit. You can include partners in the announcement, in customer stories and anecdotes. All of that matters, and you can include it. But the heart of it, it revolves around a live product demo. And so what we're really talking about here is a launch event. And, if you think about like what Benioff does with Dreamforce every year, Dreamforce is a launch event. I mean, they do all the other stuff too. There's partners and customers and all of it, but they're always presenting a ton of new products.
Which is a forcing function for the product team. So now the marketing team has said, we rented this space. We put our asses on the line. We got skin in the game.
Right.
We need to show something.
Right. When Elon says we are doing the Model 3, or the Cybertruck unveiling on such and such a date, and we've been to some of those things and we get the invitations in advance, like the engineers have to hit that. They can't miss it.
No, there has to be a Cybertruck at the Cybertruck launch.
Right. And so those events, those launch events get scheduled months in advance, and the invitations go out. There's a press announcement. And so the whole company, starting with the leader, puts their, butts on the line to hit that launch date.
Skin in the game. Just like the sales team, right? The sales team has skin in the game because they got that quarterly review. If you don't hit your number, now you're on a PIP, a performance improvement plan. You don't hit your number 2 quarters in a row, you're out, right? Is that how you ran it?
Yeah. What's really helpful about sales is you get customer feedback right away, right? So like if the customer's not buying what you're selling, you find out real quick and you can make adjustments. And the great thing about a launch event is it works the same way. If people hate it, you're going to find out really quickly. And that's a good dynamic to have. Now, a lot of founders don't want it's scary. A lot of founders are too scared that they might hear something they don't want to hear. But I think, but that's that's not, it's better to just get the news. The other thing that I think a lot of founders are scared of, what they'll say in response to this is, well, no one's going to show up at our event. They're worried they're going to declare it, they're going to build it, no one will come. And, my experience with Yammer, even in the second year of Yammer, as a startup, we were able to fill a hotel ballroom and get people to go to our user conference. And so you'd be surprised. I mean, again, we're talking about startups that are at that 50 to 500 employee stage. And so they've raised a series A or B or C. And, if they've done that, there's enough of a community of support that they can rally that community and fill, a room. Now, in today's sort of post-COVID environment, it's not going to be a hotel ballroom anymore. It's going to be a virtual event, a virtual conference. That's fine. It could just be a webinar. You're not going to have a giant user event every quarter. You may just have some sort of webinar, and that's fine. What's really important is that you have an audience, so you can see what the reaction is, and that you set the date in advance and send out the invitations, because it's not just about the external benefit of generating all that positive marketing. It's about the internal benefit of motivating the team to hit a deadline that you specify in advance.
Which is the point of this blog post, which is why it resonates so deeply, I think, with me and many people is, you're trying to reduce chaos. So to reduce chaos and make people feel good, you have to introduce some accountability. Accountability, which is called the date, and it manifests itself with the date or the sales target. Accountability actually reduces chaos, and that's what I would assume you would think is a healthy stress of being at a startup.
Yes. It increases accountability. It also increases transparency because everyone knows what they're working towards. We know that 2.5 months from now, we're all going to be convened together at this user conference, and we're going to have to, deliver. And so everyone's working towards the same goal. And that creates, a tremendous amount of, it synchronizes everybody. It creates, a lot of esprit de corps.
And for those of you who don't speak French, esprit de corps means, I think you're spirited to your core.
Call it fellowship, right? Everyone feels
esprit de corps means the spirit of the group,
right? So you all feel like you're working on the same team, right?
Kind of like the Super Bowl effect. The Super Bowl is coming. The amount of hype of the Super Bowl, they give it that nice, I don't know if it's 3 weeks up until the Super Bowl. You get this nice energy building towards it. Thinking about a small company that's releasing, every 6 months or something. Right. And it's new. It's in year 1 or 2. Would it not, in today's COVID webinar environment, where you can not show how many people showed up, why not start this? If the Clubhouse, which is the hottest startup right now in the consumer space, if Clubhouse just said, on, October 1st, we're going to be opening to the public, we're going to show 3 new features, and they did it in a webinar and 10 or 100 people show up, who cares? It at least has the same effect. So what would you say to a year 1 startup if they wanted to do something like this?
Well, it might end up being too much structure for a first year startup. There are advantages to, when you're, say, a 10-person team, just having the founder telling everybody what to do and building very quickly, and you're doing, 1 or 2 week sprints. And because you're just basically throwing spaghetti against the wall, seeing what sticks, you're iterating towards product market fit. And so, maintaining that very fluid, highly experimental approach is probably the right approach for, that pre-product market fit startup. Now, you could do what I'm saying. It wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know that you need all of the structure that I'm introducing. But like I said, around 50 employees, it's just too big for, it starts becoming too much for the founders just to manage in an ad hoc way. And certainly as you get to hundreds of employees, you need some sort of unifying structure for the company.
Okay. And any other advice in that marketing department that is a best practice for a SaaS company? What is in state of the art today in 2020 that didn't exist in the Yammer day? That's, certainly didn't exist in the PayPal days, because things do change over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea of this sort of event-driven marketing is still fundamentally correct. I think the change right now is just going to be more virtual events.
Right.
But again, remember the key thing from my point of view is that the launch event has both an external benefit and an internal benefit. The external benefit is you create what's sort of more of a lightning strike marketing event, right? Like just putting out a press release doesn't really get it done. What you want to do is a big lightning strike where you get the whole world focused on you for, a couple of days. That's what Benioff or Elon have done brilliantly with their events. And then internally, the one thing I would just add is obviously it's very motivating for the team to send their CEO on stage to showcase a new product, but it's also a really good thought exercise for the leaders of the company, for the CEO, starting with the CEO, to think about, they have to think about, well, wait, in 2 months, I'm getting on stage. What am I going to be talking about? What am I going to be announcing? Why is it going to matter?
Right.
Why should the audience care?
Yeah, and if you write that script, there was a great thing that Jeff Bezos makes his people do, which is write the press release
right,
for the product they want to build, right? In this case, having people, I just thought of this, it's kind of the new version of it, forcing the leader, the CEO, to actually give the product demo with just, fake slides.
Right.
And say, how would... the Wall Street Journal, how would TechCrunch, how would, our top 10 customers receive this? Do people even do that?
No. And, and it's a really good thought experiment to think about, why is anyone going to care when we showcase these products? Now, what a lot of founders would say is, well, we're doing business software, so it's not that, interesting. It's not like Tesla where they do these really sexy products. But again, I would say, well, look at Salesforce. I mean, that's CRM software. It's, it's pretty dry as far, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, how salespeople track their sales.
Right.
No offense,
exactly.
Salesforce. It's essential.
Right.
It's important.
Right.
I'm not sure where it sits in the pantheon of exciting.
That's right. And so what Benioff shows is that everybody can do it. I mean, not everyone's as good at Benioff. I think he's uniquely good at it, but you can still achieve a lot by emulating what they do. And the thing to think about is, why is what we're going to ship in 2 or 3 months and announce this launch event, why is this going to matter?
Okay.
And you have to start justifying that.
That's an important segue into product. So when we get back from this quick break, we're going to get to that fourth piece of the puzzle as we're building this structure here with David Sachs and talk about product best practices when we get back on This Week in Startups. It's been a crazy couple of months. We all know that. And the way we are working now is completely different than it was at the start of the year. And if there is one thing we have learned, it's having access to the right resources is essential when you need to adapt your business. And we're all doing a lot of adapting. And finding the right talent is time consuming, frustrating, and it's expensive. And that's where Fiverr can help. Fiverr's marketplace connects businesses with freelancers offering hundreds of digital services. You know the digital services. Maybe you need to do ad buying. Maybe you need to do design. Maybe you need a developer, web programming. Maybe you need to edit that video. Well, Fiverr's got those graphic designers. They've got those copywriters. They've got those programmers sitting there waiting. You can customize your search by service, deadline, price, reviews, and more. Maybe you've got plenty of time to get this done. Maybe it needs to be done in the next 48 hours, right? You could set that in the search parameters and when you put your job up on Fiverr, and you know what you're going to pay for up front. So there's no surprises and no shenanigans. And of course, you get their amazing 24/7 customer service and a network of just supremely talented, quality individuals and freelancers. We've used Fiverr at launch. We've had great success from web developers for our event websites. They've done a great job for us. Graphic designers on our portfolio company pitch decks. That's where we've had some great experience, and it makes all the difference in the world. Fiverr has always been there to supply experienced talent immediately for us. And I mean immediately. It's just amazing how fast this is. It's designed really for startups. It's that fast. So check out Fiverr.com, Fiverr. There's 2 R's in Fiverr.com, and you will receive 10% off your first order just by using the offer code TWIST, TWIST. Find all the digital services you need in one place at Fiverr.com, Fiverr with 2 R's.com/twist. Again, that's Fiverr.com/twist. Thanks again to Fiverr for solving a lot of the problems we have at our startup companies and at our firm, and for the generous offer of 10% off. That does mean a lot to us. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. Hey, everybody, welcome back to This Week in Startups. We've got David Sachs with us. You're at David Sachs on Twitter? or Dio
Yes.
Sachs. Yeah, David Sachs on Twitter. And if you have a SaaS company and you want to have one of the greats on your cap table, I can tell you there is no better investor for your company than David Sachs, and he is david@craftventures.com. I'm certain nobody else stole your email address. And you open your emails when a SaaS person sends you an email, you open it, right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I may have someone on the team look at it if it's not referred by somebody I know, but yeah, we will get them.
Now, when you open that email, what have you seen in the top of an email above the fold for a SaaS company that makes you say, to, the great Laney or, whoever on your team, get them, Bill Lee, whoever, just get on it. What do you see on the top half of the email?
It's typically we want to see, I'd say like month-over-month growth rate is a pretty important thing to see.
Got it.
I mean, that would definitely get our attention. If you're growing, anything above 10% is good, but certainly in that 15 to 20% month over month, it's going to get our attention. As you're, get closer to that $1 million ARR milestone, that certainly would get our attention.
Got it. So if the email said, 17% average month over month growth last 3 months, Mr. Sachs, I saw you on Jason's podcast.
Right.
We built SaaS software for blank.
Yes.
And we are 62% of the way on our current run rate to hitting your $1 million. Would love to take a deeper dive into it. Even a short email like that's going to make you click on the link.
Shorter is better. I mean,
Why?
all you really have to say, well, because all I really need to know is that you believe you're the early category leader in, X SaaS business software, and that you're kind of getting close to what we call a Series A milestone, which would be, $1 million or hundreds of thousands of dollars of ARR, and that you're growing at that month over month growth rate. That's all I need to know in the email to know that we should take a look at it. And then, the team's going to,
so there's no
either
reason
me or
for
someone on the team's going to look at it.
There's no reason for me to write 3 paragraphs about my last 2 failed startups. I mean, it is the email we get, right? I mean, and it's amazing how founders work against their own best interests. Even the ones who have the goods will write 3 or 4 paragraphs of their life story, and it's TLDR. It's too long, and people forget how many emails we get.
Yeah, or the first couple of paragraphs will be talking about how much they love my blog on XYZ, which I'm happy about, but that doesn't it doesn't matter, right? It's not.
One sentence, okay. Read your blog post about X. It resonated with me.
Right.
Then let's get to brass tacks.
Right.
And the timing in which you contact an investor is so important. I mean, I don't know, how many emails do you get with people saying I have an idea or I'm building a product and they just haven't launched it yet?
Yeah, I mean, I get a zillion of these emails, but I get very, very few that are in the format that I mentioned, and
it's such an unlock.
Yeah, it's an unlock if you actually have those metrics. I mean, I wonder if the reason I don't get those emails because most startups don't have those metrics.
It is hard. I mean, we've been very intentional about telling people, hey, if you have 10 customers and 5 to 10K in revenue, even as little as 2K, we'll talk to you about the accelerator. And that's really helped us with the True North. And I think you just saying explicitly, hey, when you're trending towards $1 million, and if you're over 10, but more in the 15, that's good. If you just keep putting it out there, it does work. Now we've gotten through finance and sales, being in Cadence on a quarterly basis, starting with the February 1st quarter, so you don't get caught up in the crazy end of year rush when people ask for discounts. Now we got marketing, we got the tentpole event, we're working backwards, but the product we have not gotten to yet. And we all know that at the end of the day, you have to have a great product, correct? There's no great product, there's no business.
There's no way around that.
There's no way around it. It's table stakes.
Yeah.
So
it's the raison d'etre, use another French word.
Okay.
Of having a startup in the first place is to build a product that is net new to the world.
Right. And for those of you who don't speak French, raison d'etre, means the raisin of the day. The most beautiful raisin that you eat.
It means reason for being.
Ah, yes.
It's the
Another
reason you
translation
exist.
of it. Another translation.
There's no actual raisins. There's no actual raisins in it.
There's no raisins in raison d'etre? I thought that was I thought that's how they made Wheaties. They put some raisins in there one day. Okay. You know what? This is like deja vu all over again. I still don't understand French. I've been trying for years. Okay, product. What do founders in SaaS companies need to know about product cadence?
Okay, so good product management is like filling a jar with rocks, pebbles, and sand. Have you ever seen people try to do this? You've got kind of like big rocks, might be like the size of your fist, and then there's like smaller pebbles, and then there's sand. Well, in product terms, the rocks are like the new products. They're sort of tentpole products or features. They're the big stuff.
That's Cybertruck.
Yes, for sure. That would be like, a big rock. Then you've got features, which are, important and take time. They're not quite the level of like a tentpole, but they're certainly very important.
Self-driving 2.0.
Yes, exactly. It's usually and some new version of something that already exists. It's some better, some new and improved version of something of a product line you've already got. And then you've got sand, which are the bug fixes, the UI fixes, usability improvements. It's the polishing.
No one cares. So, nobody even notices, probably.
Well, it matters in the aggregate quite a bit, right?
Okay,
and it might matter. It might matter in terms of reducing your customer service caseload, which might have an important impact on your gross margins and things like that. So it certainly matters in the aggregate, but no one of them typically matters all that much. It's certainly not something you would make news over. It's not going to be something.
Fixing something is not something you do at your tentpole event. It's not something you do in a press release. It's something you quietly do to polish it up.
That's right.
So that less calls come into support and less people churn.
Yeah.
So for every 20 of those you do, you might save 1% of churn or something. So it's critically important. But it
all adds up.
It all adds up.
But it's not going to be. It's not going to be something that's on the main stage.
Got it.
Okay, so that's product management, and what you want to do with product management is you want to put the rocks in the jar first. You want to plan those first. So the way you fill the jar is you do the big stuff first, the rocks, the pebbles, then the sand. If you try to fill the jar with sand first, what you find is that somehow the rocks just don't fit. And what happens in companies, startups that don't have effective product management, is that either they just never do the rocks, they just never get around to shipping new tentpole features, they only ship sand, they only end up doing small stuff, or they will try to do the rocks, but they will just be wildly over schedule. One of those big tentpole features that was supposed to take 1 quarter will be, quarters late. You'll still be talking about it in that board meeting 2 or 3 quarters later. There you go. So you see in this screenshot here, the jar on the left put the sand in first and the rocks don't fit. The other jar did the rocks first, the sand fits. So you want to plan the rocks on a quarterly cadence to make sure that they get done. And you also want to do that to make sure that they're scoped correctly. Because the reason why like these big rocks end up being years late is no one scoped them correctly because they weren't on a quarterly product management cadence. They just basically assigned projects whenever they felt like it, and you just expected them to get done whenever.
Which in the throwing spaghetti, winding first year trying to find product market fit, it's fine to wake up one day as a CEO or the founder and say, wait a second, I figured it out. Stop what you're doing. Right. We're going to do this.
Drop everything.
We have to test this and know in the next 2 weeks if this works, because if it does, it's the game changer of all game changers.
Right. That's right.
And that's okay, right? That's year one.
That's totally okay. Year one is all about finding silver bullets.
Got it.
And so you don't want that overhead. You do want the flexibility to be able to drop everything and go all in on that new greatest idea that you came up with.
How do you communicate to the team, since this has come up, hey, we're moving from, drop everything mode, and now we're going to be having this cadence mode? Do you do a kickoff meeting, or does it just happen organically?
Well, you got to remember that the team is growing, and so what's going to happen is you're in the process of making this transition from this very spontaneous, founder-directed mode of operating, and now you're in the 50 and then hundreds of employees. And so what typically happens is that the chaos reaches such a crescendo in the company that everybody seems to cry out at once, we need a COO. The board says it. The founders say it. They're all like, this is just too chaotic. We need to get somebody in here to help us manage this. And, maybe that would help. But my point is that if you put your startup on the Cadence, that if you use this operating philosophy I'm talking about, you will actually, you may not need that person.
Right. That person is typically the person who would implement the system perhaps, or give people the feeling of this. But it's actually not that complicated the way you explain it. It's overly complicated. It's, in a way, having this discussion with you reminds me of discussions I've had with people about growth and trying to add growth to a startup. People sometimes say, hey, we just need the growth person. And then other people say, well, maybe what you need is a growth mindset. So you don't have a growth person come in and just look at the whole company and say, here's what you each need to do. You have each person understand where the churn is happening in their part of the product, et cetera, and everybody moves to a growth mindset. Am I correct in that?
Yes. I mean, so it's, for any startup problem, it's possible to posit that there's a perfect hire who can fix it for you. But as soon as you say that, and so, most board meetings that I've been in, it always devolves into a hiring conversation, because the board identifies all these problems and then it's like, well, who's going to fix them? And then the company says, well, we don't have anyone to fix them. And then you start talking about hiring people to fix them. And the problem with that is you're essentially deferring the solution to the problem. I mean, once you identify what the problem is, you should just be able to fix it. You shouldn't have to hire someone to fix it for you.
Nothing is that complicated. I mean, if we were talking about, perhaps if you're in a startup that needs to do something in computer vision and artificial intelligence that is so niche that you got to use LinkedIn Talent Job Solutions, linkedin.com/twist to do it, and get $50 off. Maybe.
All the stuff I'm talking about was learned on the job, just learning by doing.
Just do it. And, this white knight, Superman's going to land, Spider-Man's going to come out of the shadows, Batman is going to swing in and, ride his Batmobile in and save the day. It's unnecessary. You already got 10 people or 20 people. You got 50 people in the company. Just solve it.
Right. And you also don't have time to wait to find that unicorn
hiring
hire.
Can be slow. Yeah. It could take weeks, months. Then somebody turns over, you lose a candidate. Okay. What else on product do founders need to know as we've rounded third base here? Yeah.
So, I like Jeff Bezos' 2 pizza rule at Yammer, the way, which is basically that, every feature they worked on, it had to be done by a team that was no bigger than could be fed by 2 pizzas. At Yammer, the way we implemented this rule was that we said that any project would have between 2 and 10 engineers. So 10 at the absolute max for 2 to 10 weeks. So the absolute biggest strategic priority in the company could get 10 engineers for 10 weeks. That's it. And, maybe that's a lot, by the way. That's a lot of resources. We might have had 1 or 2 of those a year. So everything had to be shippable within 10 weeks. And we forced all of our products, all those big rocks, to be scoped down to the point where they could be shipped within 10 weeks. And that helped improve the reliability of our release dates tremendously.
It also helps, doesn't it also help with morale? Because, if it is something that is so big in scope, you just never get to feel like you accomplished anything. It's better to break it up, right?
Yes. You MVP it. You shrink it down into an MVP, and that allows you to get customer feedback, so you don't end up over investing in a product that people don't actually want. Again, it's a very good thought experiment to think about what's the most MVP version of this, how do we get it out, and then let's see what people think about it, and then we reevaluate. And so this philosophy, this product management philosophy, ties in with the launch event very well, because what you do is you basically reverse engineer the launch. You start with a date, you send out the invitations, you declare that you're going to do this user conference, and then you basically start building towards that. And you can't miss. What
can we build in those 10 weeks?
That's right.
If it takes 20, then break it in 2.
Right. You must ship it by that launch event, or you're going to miss the train. The train is leaving the station. So that is the way you work. And it forces a tremendous amount of discipline, because, either you can declare a launch date and then scope the project to hit that launch date, or you can basically just decide what's in a product and have no release date, And that's sort of the problem, is that, without the forcing function of that release date, things don't get properly scoped, and people don't make effective trade-off decisions.
One thing you mentioned was just the human nature and how we're wired for the seasons, how we're wired for quarterly in some way, or in these short sprints. Maybe you could unpack that a little bit in terms of what you've learned about human nature and work in relation to this framework.
That's right. So everything we've talked about is on a quarterly cycle. Quarters are seasons. Humans are wired for seasons. I think there's fundamentally something very organic about this way of working. So let me kind of snap it all together, okay?
Please.
So you're going to have a fiscal year. It's an accounting concept, but you're going to use it to generate your reporting. The finance team will. And your sales teams are going to be on quarterly sales plans that are snapped to those fiscal quarters. So let's assume that Q1 is now going to be February, March, April.
And just to be clear, when you say fiscal versus calendar,
right?
Fiscal just means how the finance department defines 3 months.
A year. Yeah.
Or a year.
It's just how that's right.
When you say calendar, it just means the calendar, because people get caught up on what is the fiscal year.
Right. That's all it means, is that, which months are we going to use in Q1? Mm-hmm. So let's assume that we say Q1 is February, March, April.
Yeah.
So that means that the quarterly close is going to be in April and the sales kickoff is going to be in February. Now, what I would do with the launch event is slot it in March. So this is the offset. And for the simple reason that you don't want to set everybody's hair on fire at the same time. You don't want the sort of product marketing cycle, which revolves around this launch event, to be peaking at the same time that the sales finance team is sort of on that. They're hitting their kind of...
You being the founder in this, because the founder's attention is also important. It is exhausting as a founder to have to do, 3 2-hour meetings with 4 departments.
That's right.
I mean, that's 12 hours. So
if
you're doing it, on this cadence, the sales team's off. They're in their pipeline review and optimization and check, but we're getting ready for the launch of the new product.
Right. Right, exactly. So what ends up happening is, under this system, when you snap it all together, month 1 of the quarter is very dominated by planning. You've got this idea of sales kickoff. I would also always do my board meetings in that first month of the quarter, right after for the finance team closes the books.
So that's
on the previous quarter.
Takes that's 10 days, 15 days?
I would always do it in the second or third week of the quarter. Why? Because the data is still fresh. You want the board to look at the freshest sales data as soon as it gets reported out.
That makes total sense.
Right. And then on the heels of that board meeting, you're going to basically reprioritize your overall product roadmap. So you're going to take those strategic insights that you just had at the board meeting, you're going to reprioritize the roadmap, not for the current quarter, because your launch event's about to be in a few weeks, but for the following quarter. Okay. So that's month 1 is dominated by the idea of planning. Then you go to month 2. Month 2 is dominated by the idea of this launch event. Right. So the first couple of weeks of the month 2, you're finalizing the event details, you're finalizing the marketing collateral, you're finalizing the presentations. There's a lot of work that goes into that. It's, marketing centric work. And then on the heels of that launch event, in say the second or third week of month 2, right in the middle of the quarter, you're going to do a lot of debriefing. You've just had this big launch. How did it go? You're going to take all the customer learnings that you just got through all those conversations, and you're going to, feed them back into the company and internalize that. Okay. And then month 3 is, and then immediately right after that, that launch event, the engineering team is going to start working on the next quarter's release. Right. And so month 3 is this very heads down period in the company where the engineers are focused on coding and the sales people are focused on closing. And it's basically, it's closed. It's a time for heads down. It's
quiet time. It's that nice quiet time, no distractions, on the not right now list, etc. What have you learned about board meetings and financing, the ability to raise money when a company does adopt this?
Well, everything just gets a lot more predictable. I mean, that's really what you want, is to have, more predictability. And, you want your board to weigh in when the numbers are fresh, right? So, if you don't do your board meeting, if you do your board meetings in, say, month 2 or 3 of the quarter, then either you're further away from the last, from the last fresh data, so you're 2 or 3 months away, so the data you have isn't as fresh, or or it's
rough estimates.
or it's rough estimates. You're dealing with, say, a half-baked quarter.
Right. And so then you get the excuses. Maybe it's actually, we always do better towards the last 6 weeks. Anything can change, or we're off to a strong start, but I don't know if it's going to keep up.
Right.
It just becomes this sort of circular madness.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and then the last piece of it is all hands meetings, which, is a very important way, especially as a company gets bigger and bigger, for you to keep everyone coordinated, is to have, a steady stream of all hands meetings. And what the Cadence does is give you the topics for those meetings.
Right.
So immediately, right after the end of the quarterly close, I think it's a really good idea for the CEO to go in front of the company and explain how he just did. Right? Like, what were the numbers? How do we do? Exactly. What were the sales results? Okay.
Yeah.
Then you're going to have a board meeting. And right after that, I like going in front of the company and recapitulating the strategy of the company. Right. So, because board meetings are a time to take a 30,000 foot view of the company and, think about your strategy. So I like the idea of, after the board meeting, you present that strategy to the board. If it hasn't changed in the last 3 months, that's fine. There may be a lot of new employees who need to hear the strategy of the company, but maybe there's some adjustments that you're making and you need to explain that. Then you've got the launch event coming up. And what I like to do is I like to put the product managers in front of the company, and you preview what's going to happen at that launch event. You tell people what's coming. Okay. And then after the launch event, you do a big company-wide debrief. How did it go? What was the reaction? The marketing department might show press highlights. But you basically do a big debrief and you feed those insights back into the company. And
should all hands be monthly, weekly, or every 2 weeks? Because I in the early days of Google, they were doing weekly. I think Facebook, was doing it twice a month. Is there some cadence to that you buy into, or is it just the stylistic preference of the founder?
I think every 2 weeks is fine. I think weekly is fine too, but I think that if you want to do it as frequently as weekly, what I'd recommend is that every other all hands, you get somebody else in the company to go up and present.
Got it.
So I think it's good for the company to hear, especially as the company gets bigger and bigger, right? You get this compartmentalization. People don't know what's happening in other parts of the company. I think it's very useful for people to hear from the engineering leader, the sales leader, the analytics leader, and so on down the line. They can tell the whole company what's happening in their teams. So that's what I would do, because I think it gets to be a little bit much if the founder CEOs is getting up there every single week.
Yeah, it's too much. You run out of things to say. Therefore, what you say is diluted. Therefore, you just sound like you're droning on. It just becomes too much.
Right.
David, this is just it's your best piece of work, and writing is. I always tell people, writing is clarity of thought, and you clearly have nailed it with this one. And so we're going to link in the show notes to the piece. And we thank you again for taking the time to be on the podcast for the 7th time. Also, David is part of the quartet that we do the All In podcast with. So we just taped episode 5, and you can all check that out. Just do a search for All In with Chamath, Jason, and Sachs and Friedberg. Great job, and really appreciate you doing it. Anything we missed?
No, I think we got it.
I think we nailed it, right?
Let's keep it tight.
Let's keep it tight. Tight is right. All right. We'll see everybody next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.